I went into Faith the Unholy Trinity expecting a mildly entertaining homage to a generation that just predated my introduction to video games. What I didn't expect was a game that manages to generate so much atmosphere, intrigue, tension, and scares, despite a self-imposed technological handicap. However, that adherence to emulating an early 1980s console experience does limit the gameplay complexity, and leads to an over-reliance on a few anachronistic designs. Over 3 chapters, you primarily control Catholic priest John Ward on a terrifying journey that begins with his return to the site of a failed exorcism in rural Connecticut. This first chapter, originally released back in 2017, feels like a brief prologue in comparison to the subsequent ones. There's only a single location to explore and a brief taste of narrative structure and gameplay mechanics. Don't let that put you off though, as it's a pivotal moment for John, introduces a recurring antagonist, and establishes an early link to an even greater threat. Without wanting to spoil too much, John's plans to finish what he started goes awry, and the subsequent chapters deal with the fallout of that and his path towards either redemption or damnation. If you push on, you'll discover an impressively engrossing and complex story, with dozens of collectible notes, optional interactions and boss encounters, several flashback sequences that flesh out John's past, and multiple endings for each chapter. Now, to keep things cohesive, there is a canon ending for the first chapter and a narrative excuse for the events of the second, but the lengthy final chapter offers a satisfying number of optional encounters, including the titular Unholy Trinity, and multiple fates for John and the supporting cast. As a bonus for horror movie fans, you'll recognize many locations and some scenarios in Faith the Unholy Trinity that are clearly inspired by iconic films. Now that said, how the story is told might not be to everyone's taste. Significant events feature minimalist yet striking cutscenes and limited dialogue. However, to fully appreciate all the connections in the story, or unlock all the endings, you'll need to explore thoroughly and read lengthy notes in each chapter. I'll admit, some of the endings require actions I'd never have considered without checking a guide, but on my first casual playthrough, taking actions that seemed sensible or plausible given the situation, I still managed to reach a logical and satisfying conclusion. If you're a once-and-done gamer, Faith the Unholy Trinity should still offer a cohesive and entertaining ride. Now, while the storytelling elevates itself far above the standards of the Atari-era hardware, your tolerance for the dated gameplay will be a big deciding factor. You trudge slowly from screen to screen, and use just a single button to raise your crucifix to drive off demonic spirits or sanctify objects, read notes or trigger switches, and occasionally direct a torch beam. It feels particularly simplistic in the opening chapter, but the gameplay evolves in subsequent chapters to incorporate more and more puzzle elements that rely on clues either written in notes or within the environment itself. At this point, you might think the simple mechanics would improve accessibility, but unfortunately, Faith the Unholy Trinity relies on a repetitive and infuriating structure for many battles. In almost every encounter with a demon or spirit, you need to damage or drive them off by raising and directing your crucifix. To add a degree of challenge, these encounters often rely on ambushes from off-screen, invisible spirits you can only track indirectly, and random movement patterns, such as teleporting around the screen. There is an element of pattern recognition, but success is often down to your reflexes, and I'm torn on whether a gamepad or keyboard is preferable. The bad news is you die in a single hit, and the toughest encounters always include a healthy dose of RNG movement. Sometimes you'll have plenty of time to sidestep a charging demon and reorient yourself to lay on some holy damage. Other times they might spawn on the edge of the screen closest to you, or teleport block you into a corner, and all but guarantee a quick death. Now there are frequent checkpoints, including between boss phases, but they're not always consistently spaced. I'll accept the argument the artificial difficulty is another authentic element from the era, but that doesn't make slow backtracking or unavoidable deaths due to RNG any less frustrating in 2022. Now, it's pointless to judge Faith the Unholy Trinity's presentation by traditional standards, but if we're considering authenticity and how those limited rendering techniques and low-quality audio add to the unsettling atmosphere and horror, they're incredible. Again, the opening chapter is more a proof of concept before chapters 2 and 3 demonstrate what the developer can achieve. Scan lines drawn from the top, basic props make it clear what each room is meant to be. Key items, gore, and demonic runes stand out in contrasting colors. Stippling handles most of your mist, smoke, and spirits, while the jerky low frame rate animation make the demonic creatures you encounter even more unsettling in motion. When it comes to the audio, the distorted synthesized voices are creepy, and the excellent soundtrack, which mostly consists of short repeating loops, has good variety, sets the mood, and ramps up in volume to generate a constant sense of encroaching dread. The cutscenes, especially in the final chapter, are stunning, using a bare minimum of geometric complexity, a limited color range, and rotoscope animation to render some truly horrifying demons and expressive humans. Now, despite my gameplay-related gripes, I found Faith the Unholy Trinity weirdly compelling, but recommending it to a broader audience is not easy. It's not some wildly subversive title with a modern metagame hidden behind the retro aesthetics. So if you can't stomach the thought of relatively authentic Atari-era gameplay, I'd probably recommend you steer clear. If, however, you enjoy retro-styled indie projects that push storytelling far beyond what the past developers considered possible with their technology, it's one of the best recent examples, and it's really well priced too. If you've got this far, please consider giving the video a like and maybe subscribing to our channel, as it helps us grow.